Good evening, and welcome to the Candidates Forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters. Would you stand and join with me as we say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My name is Peg Fargo, and tonight I represent the League of Women Voters of the Greater Capital Area. As many of you know, the League of Women Voters has been around in New Hampshire since 1919, a full 4 months before the National League was organized. Born in the suffrage movement, the League always had two missions. One, to extend the franchise of voting and to encourage all to vote, including women. And the second, to make sure that we are informed voters. The League has remained a nonpartisan organization that never supports or opposes a candidate for office, but does provide opportunities for candidates to discuss their positions and to hear from their constituents. The League also does intensive studies on issues of concern in our community and then advocates for solutions. Often taking on controversial issues, in 1929, the League of Women Voters of New Hampshire determined that the state of New Hampshire should expand its sources of revenue for the development of a budget that would meet the needs of the state. The League has never been recognized for quick fixes. Tonight, we are very pleased to welcome the two candidates for the primary election for the position of New Hampshire State Senate in District 15. Senate District 15 encompasses the city of Concord and the towns of Henniker, Hopkinton, and Warner. This Senate seat has a 2-year term and an annual salary of $100. The primary will be held on September 9th, Tuesday. The polls in Concord will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and in Hopkinton, Henniker, and Warner from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you are not sure where to vote, you need to call your city clerk or your town clerk to find out. Before we introduce our two candidates, there are some other candidates in the audience, and if you would like to stand up and tell us what office you are running for and what district you'd Oh, is this a portend of what's to come? And tell us who you are and what you're running for. And we'll have someone bring my.
My name is Mel Myler, and I'm running for State House, District 10.
Thank you.
My name's Dave Luno, and I'm also running for State House District 10. There are 3 seats.
After 3 terms in the State House, I'm running from the State House, and I'm running for Merrimack County Commissioner. I'm Rick Watrous. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christy Dolat Bartlett. I'm representative from Ward 10, which is our Merrimack County District 19, and I'm running for re-election.
Hi, I'm Linda Kennison, and I'm running for the House of Representatives from Ward 6 in Concord.
Now let me introduce our two candidates. Kass Ardinger grew up in Claremont, graduated from Stevens High School in Claremont. She received her bachelor's degree from Dartmouth College in 1982 and her law degree from George Washington University in 1985. She has lived in Concord for the past 25 years and lists homemaker and attorney as her professions. She was elected in 2006, 2009, and 2012 to the Concord School Board, has served on the Board of Child and Family Services, is a founder of HEAR in New Hampshire, a school for deaf and hard of hearing children, serves as a commissioner on the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, Commission on Institutions of Higher Education. She was appointed by Governor Shaheen to the Governor's Council on Volunteerism. Kass is a regular volunteer at the St. Paul's Food Pantry. She has been married to Bill Ardinger for 29 years and is the mother to 3 children, Will, Ashley, and Taylor. The family pets are Homer the Golden Retriever and Laser the cat, and her hobbies include skiing, knitting, and gardening. Our second candidate, Dan Feltes, has a BA in Public Administration from the University of Northern Iowa, a master's degree in Public Policy from Georgetown University, concentrating in economics and energy regulation, and a law degree from the University of Iowa. After moving to New Hampshire in 2006, he began working as an attorney at New Hampshire Legal Assistance, representing hundreds of low-income persons and families, senior citizens, veterans, and victims of domestic violence. He also advocated on behalf of his clients in the state legislature, working constructively with Democrats and Republicans on a wide variety of issues and legislation. For the past 4 years of his tenure at New Hampshire Legal Assistance, Dan directed the Housing Justice Project, overseeing the housing advocacy work and housing grants, including the statewide Fair Housing Grant addressing discrimination in housing. Dan met his wife, Erin, in New Hampshire. Erin served as a New Hampshire delegate for President Barack Obama at the 2012 Democratic National Convention. Dan and Erin live on Hope Avenue in Concord South End with their 2 dogs, Franklin and Roosevelt. I love that. Dan has served on the Concord's Board of Ethics, the Veterans Unemployment and Underemployment Study Commission, the Veterans Legal Advocacy Study Commission, the Housing and Community Development Planning Council, and the Energy Efficiency and Sustainable Energy Board. He's also volunteered for Habitat for Humanity and Stay Warm NH. Dan's hobbies include reading, hiking, and camping in the White Mountains, going on walks with Erin and their dogs, and playing recreational sports like softball. These are our 2 candidates, and now I'm going to turn the program over to our moderator, Liz Tentarelli.
Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Liz Tentarelli. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of New Hampshire. I don't live in Concord. I can't vote for either of these candidates. I do want to point out these are the Democrat candidates in this primary race. There is a Republican running, Linda Dubé Harmon of Warner, who is unopposed. So certainly as we head towards the November election, you will be hearing more from her, I'm sure, in various venues. I want to also thank New Hampshire Technical Institute for allowing us to use this wonderful facility. We do encourage you also to visit the League's website, LWVNH.org, to find out about other candidate forums, to find out about voting, details of the how to vote and so on. We also have information about some of our projects. In the lobby, we had various brochures. If you didn't pick them up on your way in, think about picking up some on the way out. We do have a Spanish language version of how to register to vote and voter ID. We have a poster about voter ID that might go up in a nursing home or a community center or senior center. Please take anything that you think will help you spread the word to other people about how to vote, how to get registered, how to participate. It's very much what the League wants to do. Our program tonight is in that spirit of voter education, and we sincerely thank the candidates who've come tonight to make their views known and to answer our questions. You will have the opportunity to ask questions of the candidates. You can do it in writing if you're feeling a little bit shy. If you raise your hand, somebody will give you a card and we will read that question for you. Or we will take questions from the audience and my young friend Ethan will pop around with a microphone for you. The forum is being taped by Concord TV for broadcast. It'll be up later this week in Concord and Pennacook on channels 17 and 22. And it will be available as a YouTube video on demand at www.yourconcordtv.org. So if you have friends and neighbors who weren't able to get here tonight, please tell them they can still meet the candidates by watching the video. And on behalf of the voters of New Hampshire, the voters here, I thank both of you for your willingness to run for public office. Your commitment makes democracy possible. We're going to begin with opening statements by the candidates. The order was determined by a coin flip earlier, and Dan Feltus is going to speak first. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for putting this on, NHTI for hosting, Kass for being here, and also everybody in the crowd for being out here tonight to participate in the democratic process. I'm running for state senate because I know that in order to move New Hampshire forward, we can't afford to leave anyone behind. And I know that both on personal and professional experience. For the better part of the last decade, I've had the great privilege and honor of working at New Hampshire Legal Assistance as a staff attorney representing low-income folks, seniors, veterans, victims of domestic violence. Not just in court, but also in the state legislature, working on bills to give everyday folks a fair shake in the legislative process. I'll give you one concrete example. In 2008, when the recession hit, we brought to then Senator Maggie Hassan a bill to extend unemployment insurance to part-time workers who were getting left behind in the unemployment insurance system. They were not treated fairly. They were losing their jobs, otherwise eligible, but not getting unemployment insurance benefits. Maggie took the bill on. It was a good fortune to work with her. She got it done, got it through the legislature. Governor Lynch signed it, and now part-time workers are treated just the same as full-time workers when they lose their job. And that's particularly important right now with thousands of workers, part-time workers at Market Basket, losing their jobs, part-time workers at Market Basket. So I have the, elections are about distinctions, and I have the good fortune of having legislative experience working with Democrats and Republicans. I think there are some other major distinctions in this election too. I'm proud to put forward a proposal of a reasonable system of paid family leave to help working women and working families get by. That's grounded in my client experiences, it's grounded in talking with voters, it's grounded in research from the Kass Institute, the New Hampshire Women's Initiative, and my admiration for Representative Mary Stuart Giles' persistence on this issue. I think it's time New Hampshire moves forward with a reasonable system of paid family leave. There's other distinctions in this election. I made early childhood education an important component. I believe that we should move forward with early childhood education investments, including making full-day kindergarten an option for working parents. As the Concord Monitor pointed out yesterday, Kass opposed full-day kindergarten and voted against it. I believe the best investments we can make are the investments we make in our kids. They pay off in the long run. I've also talked at length in this campaign about issues affecting seniors and housing and aging in place, and wrote a column in the Concord Monitor about my concerns in terms of the shifting to Medicaid managed care and whether or not we're going to adequately provide for our seniors in terms of affordable housing and systems of care for family caregivers. I'm done.
That red card is very unnerving, I realize. Thank you. Kass Ardinger.
Thank you, Liz, and I want to echo Dan's thanks to the League and NHTI, also CCTV, for taping this, and thank you all for coming tonight. I'm running for State Senate for for the simple reason that I love New Hampshire. I love this community. I grew up here. I went to school here. I was married here. I've raised my family here. This is a community that has supported me and my family through wonderful times and through stressful times. And I have observed that this district and the people within it do the same whenever a neighbor in need presents him or herself. For that reason, I've spent the last 20 years giving back to this community in many different ways, in volunteer capacities, and hopefully I have touched many people's lives as a result of my volunteer work. For the last 8 years, I've been lucky enough to serve on the Concord School Board and get elected and reelected 3 times on a citywide basis. I was very fortunate enough to lead the board in efforts to build 3 new schools. This was a very wonderful process of building consensus out of controversy. It took years, but I was happy to be the face of consolidation and building, and so I offer my record of public service to you in that way. I have 4 priorities that I guess I will not get to, but I will get that in there after. Thank you.
We'll get it in there yet. Okay, thank you. We will now take questions from the audience. I'll ask you to raise your hand. Ethan will come around with a microphone. Who's going to start? Oh, right back there.
This is a question for Kass. Could you clarify your stand on full-day kindergarten, please?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. The issue about full-day kindergarten is one that I think that there have been misstatements made in the community. The Concord School Board, in designing the new schools, looked at various priorities, including lowering class sizes and getting full access to state building aid, which was significant for Concord. We received 43% in state building aid. We would not have been able to build 3 new schools without it. Those were our 2 of our many priorities. Full-day kindergarten was a side issue pertaining to the size of the buildings. I fully support full-day kindergarten issue coming before the school board, and when it does, we will have full and transparent discussion about it. But it will be sustainable policy if and when it passes, because we will have all the stakeholders sitting and discussing it, and it will be parents, students, teachers, administrators, and taxpayers. And so I think that, and by the way, we are very fortunate to be able to provide preschool for over 100 Concord children. So the fact that, to say that I would not support early childhood development and not support kindergarten is preposterous, especially since I've given 8 years of my life to build new facilities for our youngest students in Concord. Thank you.
Mr. Feltes, would you like to comment on that same question?
Sure, and in order to move forward on something like kindergarten and early childhood education, you need champions at the state level and the local level. Governor Shaheen led the way on kindergarten. Governor Lynch, in tandem with the progressive legislature, led the way on kindergarten. And I think if we look at the vote, we know what, the opportunity to champion kindergarten didn't occur. And Concord doesn't have kindergarten as a fact. So, 50% of communities across the state have kindergarten now, full-day kindergarten, including Hopkinton, including Warner, including Pennacook, Merrimack Valley. It's an important issue. As I said before, the investments we make in early childhood education, the research shows, pays off in the long run. That's the best investments we can make is in our kids.
Thank you. Another question? Oh, no, we've got a shy batch. All right, wait a minute. We got a few questions via email. Oh, we've got one right there. Go ahead.
This is a question for both the candidates. When either of you are elected, what would be the first piece of legislation that you would want to sponsor?
Mr. Feltes, you go first.
Sure. The first piece of legislation that I'll sponsor is a system of paid family leave to help working women and working families get by. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. If a mom with a kid and the kid is sick and you can't take the kid to daycare, but is she still charged the daycare cost? Yes, she is, because of the fixed cost of daycare. And then if she takes a sick day to take care of the kid, then she loses out on pay for that sick day. We don't have even paid sick days in the state of New Hampshire, and folks that are working hard to get by are getting squeezed, and they feel like, in some cases, in the words of a voter I talked to on this very issue, that the system is sort of rigged against them, that they're not able to get ahead. And so that's what I would pursue, a reasonable system of paid family leave, including a reasonable exemption for small employers, and that's what I would propose. And look, this has been debated for a very long time at the State House. I think it's time to finally get it done.
Ms. Ardinger.
I think the first piece of legislation I might sponsor would have to do with state building aid. That has been in moratorium for about 4 years now. It means that the other school districts in New Hampshire are any state aid when they are looking at trying to renovate or rebuild their aging fleet of schools. I know from experience while we were doing our building program that dozens of school districts across the state were suffering with the full costs of trying to renovate their schools in the face of safety issues, life hazard issues, fire issues, and I know the pressures that leaves on local taxpayers. So I think that the state needs to step up and pay its fair share and play its role in leading education in New Hampshire. And local school districts do wonderful things with what they have, but we all know what pressures there are on local taxpayers, and it would help a great deal if that moratorium were lifted, and so other school districts could have the benefits that Concord has.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. Right behind you, Ethan.
Thank you, both of you. I'd like you to look at the state as a whole and ask what are the up to three most significant problems that face us as a state, and what do you think you can do about it?
Now, that may be hard to fit
It's
into...
only three, not more than three.
Okay. If three are too hard in 2 minutes, let's at least get one or two, and then we can extend it and have another round. Ms. Ardinger, you're first.
I think one of the first issues that has to be addressed there would be the amount of revenues that the state brings in through all its various taxes. Our business taxes are still $70 million off the high of 2008, right before the recession hit. There's a lot of room for New Hampshire to establish a more welcoming atmosphere for businesses, and certainly ways of tweaking laws to not discourage small business owners. Governor Hassan has initiated a program called Live Free and Start that looks across the board at all regulatory statutes that impact our business climate in New Hampshire, looking for ways to attract businesses to New Hampshire and not have them always go down to Massachusetts. So I would be a big supporter of that kind of analysis and work. And so revenues always being a perennial problem, I would say that New Hampshire, as a Democrat, I would say New Hampshire has a revenue problem, does not have a spending problem. And so I think that we have to set aside the kind of rancor and political legacy that we've always had in this state concerning broad-based taxes and have a straightforward discussion about what are the needs in our budget, and just talk about it in an open and transparent way so that we can all have an understanding of what it takes to provide essential services in our state and do it within a reasonable way.
Mr. Feltus.
Thank you. I agree. New Hampshire has a revenue problem, not a spending problem. Look, neither one of us are, I guess the pledge only applies technically to a governor, but neither one of us are taking it. But I've put out there an idea. Let's talk about capital gains. Let's talk about actual affirmative basis to raise revenue. Capital gains would be an extension of the interest and dividends tax. It would generate $170 million a year to invest in education, infrastructure, job training, and jobs. And it would, the way a capital gains is structured, 87% of that $170 million would come from people who make over $200,000 a year. And if we're going to be serious about actually investing in education, actually investing in infrastructure, then we have to have the serious discussion. We have to put ideas out there. Incidentally, the capital gains wouldn't touch 401ks. It wouldn't touch IRAs. And even the non-401k and IRA, it has a $3,600 exemption. So any argument that seniors would get hit by it is not correct. So let's have the debate in Concord about our priorities. If we really are serious about investing in education, you have to raise revenue. If you're really serious about infrastructure and job training and early childhood education, you have to raise revenue. All right? It's not just saying that no revenue options off the table, and that we have we have a spending problem. We don't have a spending problem. We have a revenue problem. You have to affirmatively have that debate, and I'm willing to do that if you were to elect me to state senate.
Thank you. Now, we didn't get through 3 priorities. Should we have one more go-round? Mr. Feltes, another one?
Well, embedded in my answer was education, infrastructure, job training, and again, in order to care for the most needy in our state, you have to seriously consider revenue options and have a really concrete debate about that in moving forward. We also have a long-term energy problem in New Hampshire and the northeastern grid. So we need to consider all options in terms of what we're going to do in terms of long-term energy problem in the state of New Hampshire and on our grid, including energy efficiency, conservation, transmission enhancements, linking up to the wind farm in Maine. It's not just about Northern Pass. It's about considering all options to deal with our energy problem. And incidentally, that's a big issue in terms of reducing costs for businesses and residences and helping our economy move forward. The other issue that I would note is healthcare, especially in terms of long-term care. And as I mentioned earlier, we're transitioning to a system of Medicaid managed care. I think we need to make sure that we have the non-medical services provided to folks that are aging in place in their homes, which is a preference of many seniors. And we have the necessary care, necessary support for family caregivers that are taking care of seniors. And these are things that we need to discuss, move forward, and they're the big issues of the day.
Ms. Ardinger, what do you see as some of the other big issues?
I just want to say it's refreshing to hear Dan say what he's saying, because I agree with so much of it. I will say that I think one way to look at revenues is, and what I've been talking about, is make sure we have our priorities straight. I believe that if we invest smartly in infrastructure, and by that I mean schools, I mean energy, roads and bridges, the kinds of things, the kinds of infrastructure that will attract young families and businesses to New Hampshire. That's what's going to fill our coffers. And so, for instance, I have seen the way that the new schools in Concord have stimulated economic activity. And now with the repurposing of the old schools that are now on tax rolls, that are now being developed, and new jobs have stemmed from 2 of the schools being repurposed. This is economic activity that grew from nothing. People used to choose Bow and Hopkinton to move to for their young children's education. Now they look twice, and they look at our new schools and they say, wow, and they move to Concord. That's really important for not just Concord, but for other school districts that can rally the resources to provide that kind of platform for their local education. But as I said before, it's really important that the state understand its role in providing a structure and outside support to help local taxpayers make sure that they are giving the best education possible.
Thank you. Do we have another question in the audience? Oh, we have several. We'll move Ethan over to the other side of the auditorium after this one.
Hi, I would just like to ask both the candidates what they feel are the most prominent environmental issues that are facing our state and what they would propose to do about them.
Okay, environmental. Ms. Ardinger, you're first.
Well, I think when I hear environmental, I think energy. And certainly Northern Pass is a controversial issue that has come at us, and we are in the midst of trying to make our way through that. I think that I would be aligned with Governor Hassan's take on Northern Pass, and that is that it really involves a balance of different policies. First and foremost, we have to protect the pristine nature and the unique quality of our environment, especially in the North Country. It's what makes New Hampshire unique. It supports a very vital tourist industry, and whatever we look at in terms of transmission or any power source, we always have to keep in mind that we do not want to destroy or violate our gifts of the environment. That's a very important policy to consider. Another policy that we need to consider is that we have diversified energy sources. Was stated before that without with primary balance of energy and natural gas, our ratepayers, our businesses, our families are going to be hurt by rate spikes and shortages. And so that is a policy decision that has to be made. And I would just add that 35 years ago, as a student at Dartmouth, I had an internship at the Governor's Energy Council under Hugh Gallen. And back then, I did some work looking at energy policy in New Hampshire. Believe it or not, 35 years later, we still don't have a comprehensive energy policy. And I think instead of being reactive and having the kinds of environmental concerns we have, we should be proactive and start thinking about what we require in an energy policy.
Thank you. Mr. Feltes?
For the last 8 years or so, I had the honor and privilege of working at Legal Aid, including with Alan Linder, who's here, on energy matters, helping open up access to low-income energy efficiency for low-income households and seniors to reduce their energy burdens. I know that there's more that we can do to invest in energy efficiency. I would propose a bill in the state Senate to increase the threshold of the Reggie auction proceeds above $1 to $2 or $3 so that many millions more can go into energy efficiency to invest right here in the state and create good jobs. I would also propose to rework the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standards, to increase our investments in renewable energy. And I would also, I think every budget season, these dedicated funds are attacked in the budget process, and I would do my best to hold them off from the General Revenue Fund budget discussion, including LCHIP. We need to do our best to protect that program. In terms of Northern Pass, I agree with Governor Hassan's statement that it still may be possible to get reliable hydropower from Canada without sacrificing our natural beauty in our tourism industry, which incidentally is the second biggest industry in the state. But the key word is reliable to me, and this is, I think, where we differ on this issue. The threshold question that needs to be answered by PSNH and Hydro-Quebec is whether or not that energy is actually going to come to the New England grid in the wintertime and the price spikes. And Hydro-Quebec even wrote a piece in the Monitor a few weeks ago talking about how, with respect to their Vermont enterprise, they're not contractually obligated. Well, if there's no guarantee that we're going to benefit from it, then why have the big fights about where it's buried and that sort of thing? And so that's the threshold question. And PSNH and Hydro-Quebec need to produce some documents and need to show that we're going to get that benefit.
Thank you. On our league page, website rather, there is a page dedicated to energy issues. We're just starting our study of that, and the Department of Energy and Planning has a draft proposal. The final one is coming out this fall, so you should be looking for that in the paper or look on the website to find out what they are proposing as a long-term energy plan. Don't know what will come of it. Planning is one thing, action is another, isn't it? Another question, and we'll come over to this side, Ethan. Right in the second row is somebody.
I'd like to ask both candidates about your thoughts on road, highway infrastructure, and gas tax, and gasoline tax.
So a question about your views on roads, highways, and the gas tax. Mr. Feltus, you're first.
Okay, thank you. I support the gas tax increase. We need to invest in roads, bridges, and infrastructure. If we're going to attract good jobs and keep jobs here and attract young people and young families, we got to invest in our infrastructure. And that's something that businesses need. Certainly I support the increase in that. Now, in terms of other investments, other than the gas tax, because there's a lot of debate about whether or not it was even enough. A lot of folks said that it wasn't. And the Department of Transportation is starved right now, and the investments that we make in our roads and bridges need to ramp up. Again, it's not just about talking about we're not going to take any revenue option off the table. We have to actively and constructively debate revenue options, including capital gains, in order to invest in the priorities we believe in order to move New Hampshire forward. And that's what I'll do in the State Senate.
Thank you. Ms. Ardinger?
I would have voted for the gasoline tax, while I'm aware that it is not enough to actually address the entirety of the problem that we are facing now in the state. It's important to start somewhere, and for 23 years, we did not touch that tax. To my mind, that makes no sense at all. It just makes it harder the longer you put off those kind of repairs. I've tried very hard in my tenure on the school board to make sure that when we are looking at our 10-year and 15-year maintenance plans for our buildings, that they make sense, that we're investing enough money to make sure that we are keeping our investments maintained. And for the state to not have increased slowly over time the gasoline tax, I can't understand that. And so now it hurts more. And I understand that there are a lot of folks that will feel that pinch. But without investment in our infrastructure, as I said before, and that includes roads and bridges, we are not going to be able to support the kind of business and young families coming to this state, and we will be literally left out in the cold.
Thank you. Another question up there behind you, Ethan.
This is for both candidates. About a year ago or 2 years ago, the Justice Department and the Disability Rights were forced to sue the state of New Hampshire to provide adequate care for the mentally ill. There was a settlement about 6 months ago that came down, but as far as I know, there's been still no agreement in the legislature, although there was an amount of money agreed upon about how that's actually going to be funded. So I'm wondering what each of you would do to address the inadequate care that the mentally ill get in this state.
Ms. Ardinger?
Yes, that is a huge need that we have to address. We cannot ignore it. It's the kind of social costs that result from our state not recognizing that there are some essential services. I think that during the Bill O'Brien years, we saw drastic slashing and cutting of the budget, and that's what I worry about when I'm faced with questions about other revenue sources, for example, expanded gambling. My position is simply that there are so many services that the state must fund that I don't believe that it's very smart to take any revenue source off the table. If we are left without funds to pay for services like mental health illness in communities, we end up with a cost that's far greater than it would have if we simply had provided funding for our community services that were top in the nation just 15 years ago. So again, it's a recognition of what is the role of state government, and by understanding that essential role, then I think it puts a lot of other things in place, and you go looking for the revenues, and you make sure that your priorities are in the right place.
Mr. Feltes?
Thank you. I've had the honor and privilege of representing, lots of clients, including mentally ill, and including working in some cases with their guardians on access to housing and access to health care and access to basic necessities of their lives. And I know what they're going through. I've been there with them. I've stood with them. And we need to fully fund this settlement. And to do it, again, this is a difference here in this election. It's not enough to just say, I'm not going to take any revenue option off the table. You have to affirmatively produce some revenue options in the state Senate and debate them to invest in the priorities we believe in. And that mental health settlement needs to be funded. It's critical. And even above and beyond that, we can improve our mental health services. We're transitioning to Medicaid managed care. A lot of our mental health services are already in that system. We're seeing some hiccups along the way. And folks need to be cared for, and the investments need to be made to make sure that the system functions properly for our most needy, including our mentally ill. And that's what I'll do.
Thank you. Another question? That gentleman right there?
Thank you. You both have made several comments about our needs for additional revenue. We have a revenue problem, not a spending problem. And they're kind of waffling around a lot of different issues and possibilities. What are your policies, or what are your thoughts on the income tax?
Oh, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. Okay. Mr. Feltes?
So I haven't been waffling around. I talked about capital gains. That's $170 million a year in investments we can make. Now, on the broad spectrum of, here's broad-based income tax over here, here's your interest. We already have an income tax. It's the interest and dividends tax. Now, if you expand the 5% of the interest and dividends tax to cover capital gains, you generate another $170 million a year. Now, you don't do something broad-based when you do that, however, but you make your effort to get there, and it's politically feasible, it's practicable, and you need to put it out there to try to have the debate to invest in the priorities we believe in. So I'm sympathized with folks that want a broad-based tax that includes capital gains, which it would, but at this point in time, what I would propose is a capital gains tax. I think it's practical. I think we can get it done, and that's $170 million in the state's coffers that we can invest in education, infrastructure, jobs, and the things that we believe in, including early childhood education, including incentivizing communities to move forward with full-day kindergarten as an option for working parents in their town. So that's what I believe in. That's what I'll do. I'll have that debate, and we just need you to get me there.
Thank you. Ms. Ardinger?
I'd entertain a proposal for a capital gains tax. I think that makes all the sense in the world. I would not take any pledge to take any source of revenues off the table. 50 years ago, my uncle Harry Spanos ran against Meldrum Thompson for governor. He was the Democratic nominee, and it was in 1976, in that era of Meldrum Thompson, when the pledge initiated. And my uncle refused to take the pledge, and he was clobbered. And unfortunately, that legacy still lasts today in New Hampshire. And we're here to say, We want to have a conversation about all sources of revenue, including broad-based income tax or sales tax. I do think that given the pledge that the governor has taken, that we will not have one in the next legislative session. So I think it would be a better idea to look at other sources like a capital gains.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question way up in back, Ethan.
I have my 2 kids here, and I'm kind of worried about their future. Do you, too, think that climate change is a problem? If so, is there a role that the state Senate has to play in doing something about it? If so, what would you do, and where would you find the money for it?
Ms. Ardinger, you're first.
Yes, I do think climate change is a problem, and I worry about it. I have children, 22, 24, and 27, and I think that the role of our state elected officials should be to work with regional areas, other states. New England is the recipient of all kinds of bad stuff from the Midwest. So this is not just a standalone state issue. The EPA exists and the federal agency exists because we know this is a national issue where and the environment and pollutants in the environment do not respect state borders. The regional greenhouse gas initiative is something that I would support. I think that whatever economic incentives that we can provide to make sure that polluters are doing what they can to reduce emissions make sense to me. And you know, but we do have issues of federal importance like emissions from our fleet of cars that would be impacted by federal law. But again, I think it's an economic issue primarily, and we want to balance the costs of reducing emissions with the costs of energy for people who have to pay higher prices as a result of reducing it. So again, one of balancing policies and making really complex analyses of situations that, you know, really are, I think, highly charged.
Mr. Feltus.
Yes, climate change is real and humans are helping contribute to it. And New Hampshire can't just sit on the sidelines, and right now we're a participant in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. As I said earlier, I would propose legislation in the state Senate to increase the dollar threshold on the auction proceeds to invest many millions more in energy efficiency, which is our most effective resource in saving energy. I would also propose a change in the renewable portfolio standard, including the alternative compliance payments, so we can increase our investments in renewable energy out of the RPS. Those are the 2 primary funds and primary programs that New Hampshire has to deal with this. Those are dedicated funds. They're off budget. And every now and then the legislature wants to scoop them up and, you know, put them into the general fund. I would fight back against that. And I would also fight back to make sure that we increase and ramp up our investments in a reasonable way from both RGGI and RPS. And that's what we can do. Those are the 2 programs. That's what we can do at the state level, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Another question? Ethan, way down here. Ms. Bartlett.
I'd like to change the subject a little bit to affordable housing. I think that New Hampshire has some real inequities between towns for a couple of reasons. One is the property tax affects some towns with a much heavier burden than others. And there are some towns and cities where the housing cost has become so great, which includes property tax. And I'd like to know Ms. Ardinger, particularly you, in that you've been quoted as saying the property tax is a progressive tax. And I'm wondering if you're still able to defend that.
Is this
Okay.
about housing, affordable housing, or?
Well, the property taxes is part of affordable housing. Some towns, the property taxes are much greater because there is no
I thought you were
basis for the-
referring to workforce housing.
Okay, well, let's go
issues.
just for the property tax then.
Okay.
You have been quoted as saying the property tax is a progressive tax. And I have a hard time with that description. If you would expound
All
on
right,
that a
we're,
bit.
we're going to let each candidate reply to their views on the property tax. Mr. Feltes, it's your turn.
Sure. If you look at the analysis of the state and local tax burdens in the state of New Hampshire, the bottom 20% in terms of income pay an aggregate tax burden of 8.6% when you take into account property tax and all the state taxes. 8.6% for the bottom 20%. The top 1% income earners in the state of New Hampshire, tax burden 2.4%. 2.4%. So we have a regressive system of taxation in the state. Why? Because we rely heavily on the property tax. Now, if you were to, in fact, raise revenue at the state level, including through capital gains, you could provide some additional relief to reduce property taxes in the municipalities, and that's going to help senior citizens in particular. And I'm glad that Kass has agreed on the capital gains tonight. And there's other things that we can pursue and debate in the state Senate, including in 2001, the non-lineal inheritance tax was repealed. And that's another 20 or 30 million. So these are things that we need to consider. Why? Because it's important to reduce property tax burdens at the local level. That's an issue of affordable housing, especially for senior citizens.
Ms. Ardinger?
Well, first of all, when you reduce property tax through raising other taxes, you're losing the revenues that you are proposing to raise through the other tax. So that's one issue that is lost in translation here for me, Dan. And secondly, I think that the comparison that I was making, if I referring to what you were quoting me, was the comparison was the property tax versus a proposed income tax. In New Hampshire, the Constitution provides that any income tax that's raised by the state has to be flat. And so a 3% income tax obviously will take more out of the pockets of lower income people than it does higher income people. So in terms of comparison to a proposed income tax, that would be regressive, I'm not sure how regressive a property tax would be. In terms of what our property tax, how it's raised, 50% of the property taxes in this state are raised through businesses, utilities, and second homes. These are homeowners with second homes. These are people presumably with resources to be able to pay taxes on the big homes that you see on Lake Winnipesaukee and Lake Sunapee. And the rest of the money is raised through localities around the state. And that, granted, depending on the tax base in each community, it's going to be more burdensome in some, like my hometown of Claremont, than it is in others, like Moultonborough. And that is an issue that could be mitigated by a state property tax and perhaps pooling the state taxes that are raised by that and distributing them in a more equal way.
Thank you. Another question? Up here on this side, this gentleman.
As a segue to the affordable housing question, given what recently happened in Concord with the Vegas block being condemned without any plan for relocating those tenants, many of which had mental illness and other problems, the question I have for you is, what would your plan be from the state level for addressing affordable housing issues?
Ms. Ardinger?
Well, I think the state policymakers have to find incentives for municipalities to provide more workforce housing. This is a problem that we have in our state where many people are forced to work many miles from their place of working, and it really does push away businesses out of the state because we don't have enough workforce housing. At the same time, this is a municipal issue, and I think that it's a balance between asking municipalities to put in place policies that allow for the building of workforce housing in balance with market rate housing. We see that in Concord. It's, you know, it is something that I think is always being talked about and questioned, and I agree. I don't believe we do have enough workforce housing in Concord. It's a problem all over New Hampshire, and one that I would definitely want to address in terms of providing state incentives to address that lack of housing.
Mr. Feltes?
You know, New Hampshire Legal Assistants and the Business and Industry Association teamed up. Every now and then they did that. And they teamed up on workforce housing because it's not just an issue of reducing homelessness, it's an economic development issue. And incidentally, it's an issue of attracting and keeping young families in the state, which is demographically needed given the demographic changes as outlined in Steve Norton's Headwinds and Tailwinds report in 2012. We need to do it. We need to attract young people, keep them in the state, and affordable housing and workforce housing is a step in the right direction. The Vegas building is a horrible situation. In 2009, I litigated the Vegas building case to provide heat and hot water. Can you imagine that? A revolutionary concept. A landlord should provide heat and hot water, and that has a long history, and it's a sad situation. And I think that the folks that are getting relocated, hopefully they'll have the opportunity to do it, and I know that they're in good hands with New Hampshire Legal Assistance.
Thank you. Right next to you, Ethan, Mr. Dornan.
I'm Chris Dornan, the founder of a group called Citizens for Criminal Justice Reform. Sylvia Larson, the woman you're going to replace or follow, was a champion of prison reform. She was one of the prime movers behind the Criminal Justice Reinvestment Act that responsibly reduced the prison population by 300 people in 1 year before the Republicans gutted it. And she was one of the prime leaders behind the groundbreaking for women's prison today. She sponsored the legislation.
Head for a question, Chris.
How are you going to follow her legacy in prison reform?
Thank you. Mr. Feltes, prison reform?
You know, again, I'm proud of a lot of folks that are in this room. Alan Linder, Elliot Berry, Kay Drought, who's not here, attorneys at New Hampshire Legal Assistance, who brought the lawsuit against the state that prompted the building of the women's prison. I'm proud of Governor Maggie Hassan for putting it in her budget, in her capital budget. And today was a monumental day in the groundbreaking of building that women's prison, and everybody should be proud of that. It's a great, great day. And what we got to do now is move forward, build the prison correctly, and fund the essential services for women in the prison, including discharge planning to make sure women have the best options and to get on their feet when they leave the prison. And we can't shortchange the operational budgets of either the men's or the women's prison, and our recidivism rates are at stake as well if we do shortchange it. So that's why, again, all of these questions are circling back. Everything we care about is circling back to revenue, and to a large extent. And it's not just enough to say, I'm not going to take any revenue option off the table. You have to propose revenue. That's what I've done. I'm glad Kass agrees on the capital gains tax. There are other things that we can propose and debate, but in order to make the investments that we believe in, we need to have that debate about revenue.
Ms. Ardinger?
Commissioner Wren recently said that only 12% of the men's prison population does not suffer from mental illness or substance abuse. To that fact, he is proposed, along with some other people in state government, a breaking down of silos that prevents government agencies from working together to solve problems that people experience. So in terms of mental health and substance abuse, if all of those people are in prison due to those illnesses, then we've got a big problem in not identifying that when it could make a difference in the population of who goes to prison. In terms of breaking down silos, I've been doing some reading about the medical homes. That's another really interesting solution-based issue for looking at treating the whole person and not separating out insurance versus illness versus mental health treatment. You treat the whole person, and there are, I believe, 9 pilots across the state that have experimented with these medical homes. Similarly, as I said before, if we could have state agencies really brainstorm and figure out ways to break down the kinds of silos we have between our corrections institution and our Medicaid and all of the issues that plague our prison population, I think we might end up with some solutions that would reduce that population.
Thank you. We promised time for the candidates to ask each other questions, so I'm going to take the prerogative of asking a league question as the last one, and then we'll let the candidates talk back and forth a bit. Should New Hampshire have an independent redistricting commission, as some other states do have? After the 2020 census, of course, we'll have to redistrict. Should it be done solely by the legislature, or would you support an independent redistricting commission? Ms. Ardinger, you're first.
Yes, I would support that. I think that issues of redistricting are just fraught with political minefields. I was asked to serve on the redistricting body that when we were looking at the last census for Concord, and it was an interesting process. It's a very complicated process, and sometimes I would think that I'm not accusing anyone, but I would think that our lawmakers might default to the easier way of just, going the political route rather than, what makes sense in terms of geography and putting mixes of people together. So yes, I think that makes a lot of sense, and would like to hear more about proposals for who would be on such a commission.
Okay, Mr. Feltus.
I agree, it makes a lot of sense. I think that you're looking at Senate District 15 right now, which is, if not the most Democratic redistricted district in the state, it's the second most Democratic redistricted district in the state. And that may, benefit whoever wins this primary, but it doesn't benefit necessarily the democratic process. And so I think that, the days of gerrymandering should be over. Let's have some type of constructive committee to look at this. And I agree that, I would consider the formation of that committee. I do want to note, in response to the previous gentleman's question, I mentioned legal assistance and Governor Hassan, but Senator Larson has done wonderful work on moving this forward, the women's prison, and she's a wonderful person, and she served with distinction for 20 years, and we need to applaud her for all the work.
Big shoes to fill for whoever wins this election, yes. Now's the time when you get to ask each other some questions, and we had agreed to 1-minute answers. I'm not sure that's realistic, but we're going to try. So, Mr. Feltus, would you like to ask the first question of Ms. Ardinger?
Sure. This has been an amazing experience for me, campaigning and listening to people's stories and being out on the campaign trail. I think another element of this is elevating the voices of people who are often not heard, maybe not even here tonight. And so, Kass, if you could share with the voters maybe a compelling story you've heard on the campaign trail if someone struggles. I think that would be good.
Well, I don't have to go to the campaign trail for that because I experience that almost weekly in my shifts at St. Paul's Food Pantry. I work with a population of new Americans, immigrants to this country who are big users of our food pantry at St. Paul's. I work with mothers, single mothers who come in struggling with issues of food insecurity. This is something that I've been faced with for the last 8 years since I've been volunteering with the pantry. Another aspect of that issue is that we have a school district that averages 40% free and reduced lunch in Concord. And I don't know if people are aware of the levels of poverty in Concord, but we are aware of it in our school district. We deal with it every day.
And Ms. Ardinger, you may ask Mr. Feltus a question.
Dan, you've received the endorsement of several labor unions. The unions have set enactment of expanded gambling as one of their top priorities. With these union endorsements, how free would you be as a senator to analyze without bias any expanded gambling bill and to perhaps vote against a gambling bill since it would be in direct opposition to your union support?
Well, as you know, Kass, I'm more reluctant on gambling than your position. I have more strict criteria. Kass and I agree that we need to look at the revenue projections, but I've laid out further criteria. I've laid out that I said that the Capitol Center for the Arts, I don't want to see it go under. With an entertainment venue and a casino, if there's any possibility that the Capitol Center for the Arts goes under, I'm not going to vote for the bill. I've laid out other criteria too, grounded in my experience working with people with addiction. The bill would have to have adequate resources and safeguards to deal with the issue of gambling addiction, or I wouldn't vote for it. And I'm very concerned about the issue of proliferation. So those are additional criteria that I've put in, and so my criteria are respectfully more demanding than what we've heard. And so that's how I would review gambling legislation.
Ms. Ardinger, would you like to state your position on that? Because I'm afraid Mr. Feltus might have put some words in your mouth on that one.
Yes, that's been happening tonight. My position on expanded gambling is that I need to know a series of facts that are not knowable at this point before I would make a decision. It would really involve a very intense process of analysis. The things that I need to know are what are in a bill, what's contained in a bill. I certainly would expect that it would have treatment for addiction. I would expect that it would have issues that would protect local places like the Capitol Center. I've never said otherwise. I would want to know what are the realistic estimated revenues that would come from a casino. What we know now is that there is a glut in New England, and I believe that if we look at the estimates closely, they would be a little bit high, and I would want to make sure that we're getting realistic revenues, because if they're too low, it's not worth it, because the cost to gambling would be higher than what we would be getting in return.
All right, thank you.
I had several other factors, but I'll hold them.
Okay. Mr. Feltus, would you like
Sure.
to ask Ms. Ardinger a question?
Kass, the market basket crisis has gripped our economy and our unemployment insurance trust fund. And my question is, have you had an opportunity to visit any of the workers at Market Basket, and do you think the state is doing enough to help in the situation?
I think that the role of elected servants should be to encourage the coming together of these quarreling sides, but beyond what the governor and the governor of Massachusetts have done recently, and having private negotiations or trying to build consensus amongst the quarreling parties. Beyond that, I think that it's not a function of state nominees or candidates for. I think you may be getting in the way of some very significant process, but you don't know because it is private, and I would be very cautious before I said that we should do all that we can as elected servants to fix that. Obviously, we want our market basket employees to get back to work and our shoppers to get back to the stores that they love.
Thank you. Ms. Ardinger, a question for Mr. Feltus?
Dan, Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook has said that a key problem in our society is that women are not making it to the top leadership positions anywhere in the world. She cites statistics that show that women are not equally represented in either private or public sector jobs or elected positions. The New Hampshire Women's Initiative has also emphasized these disturbing trends, describing a granite ceiling in New Hampshire. Why do you think leadership by women in our governments and our boardrooms is important to our future and our families?
It is, and I'm proud to live in a state where we have an all-women delegation. And I'm proud to live in a state where our governor is Maggie Hassan, and she's a great progressive leader. And we have a wonderful Chief Justice, too, Linda Delanis. It's just that in this particular race, I believe I'm the more progressive candidate, and that's why I'm running. On issues from paid family leave to raising the minimum wage, to allow the issues that we discussed tonight. That's why I chose to run. It is very important to expand economic opportunity for women through paid family leave. As an example, for raising the minimum wage, 7 out of every 10 workers in the state of New Hampshire at minimum wage are women. It's time to reinstate and raise the minimum wage. If we want to provide the opportunity, the economic opportunity for women to go up the ladder in corporations and in boardrooms, it's time to do paid family leave, and that's one of the differences in this election.
Thank you. Question from you to Ms. Ardinger.
Sure. Kass, I received a mailer recently that indicated that you're in support of improving winter energy assistance programs. I'm wondering what would be your plan to do that?
Those would be programs provided by the state to provide incentives for people to tighten up their houses and make sure that we have the ability and funding for providing low-income families the ability to conserve what they can. Also, I think that we always have a problem in this state of making sure there's enough funding in our wintertime heating assistance, and occasionally we see the federal delegates like Jean Shaheen step forward and try to find funding at the federal level. We know that we have very cold winters in New Hampshire, and it's very important to make sure that we're doing all that we can to conserve and provide infrastructure for enough energy to come through.
Thank you. And a question from you for Mr. Feltus.
This is so fast. In my campaign, I've emphasized my experience as an elected official who has had to bring people together to collaborate and to synthesize different viewpoints so that a consensus can be built on long-term sustainable policies. I've also cast tough votes on difficult issues in a nonpartisan role. Could you describe how your experience advocating on behalf of clients translates into a record of bringing people together to make necessary compromises and to build consensus?
Well, that's what I've been doing for the better part of the last decade. I've worked with Republicans and Democrats on multiple pieces of legislation, including the state budget, including energy efficiency, affordable housing issues, unemployment compensation issues, and that's how we had to get things done in a constructive, bipartisan way. And some of my best friends working in the state senate don't have a D behind their name; they have an R behind their name. And we got things done, including creating a veterans legal advocacy project. Working on a whole host of issues, and so there's a lot of examples, and that's how you get things done. You make the proposals. Obviously, you've heard tonight some of my proposals are pretty progressive, but you make the proposals and then you negotiate in a constructive way to get things done. And no one party or one person has a monopoly over good ideas. You work together, you get it done, and that's what I've been doing for the better part of a decade.
Thank you. And a question from you, from you, Mr. I'm getting tired. From you, Mr. Feltes. Thank you.
Thanks. Cass, we talked about full-day kindergarten earlier. I just want to clear it up. As you know, it's a priority in my race, early childhood education, including expanding full-day kindergarten as an option to working parents. If you had that vote over from 2009 again today, would you vote to support full-day kindergarten?
Dan, I have to remind folks here that you're talking about two different areas, levels. I represent a local school board and you're talking about state policies. We were at the school board level, we were designing buildings and we were reliant on state building aid. That building aid does not cover the extra costs associated with full-day kindergarten. That would have meant increasing if we had passed a full-day kindergarten at that time, but that wasn't really the issue at stake. As I said, we were designing the buildings and we were talking about space requirements and meeting DOE building requirements. If we had done that, that would have probably increased the local tax rate a good 3%. Without any possibility of receiving state aid. So I just remind you that to keep in mind that local tax payers are at the mercy of what the state decides it will and will not pay for.
Okay, and Ms. Ardinger, you get the last question, and then we'll go to closing remarks.
Dan, in my elected experience in Concord, I've been gratified to lead an advocacy effort to explain how public investment in good public schools can be the very best and most effective economic development investment government can make, helping to develop a well-educated workforce and attracting young families and businesses to New Hampshire. Could you please explain how you would support policies that would allow New Hampshire to compete for good jobs for our families without unduly burdening them through added taxes and costs?
Well, we talked earlier about investments in education and job training and infrastructure. Education at all levels. We need to take a cradle-to-career approach to education with an emphasis on early childhood development, including full-day kindergarten. We need to move forward and invest and make those investments. And now what I talked about earlier, we got to consider revenue. It's not just enough to say no revenue option is off the table. Affirmatively put out revenue options. Senate District 15, barring the redistricting committee, is the most, if not the most, Democratic district in the state. I believe that this senator should take the lead to push the envelope on revenue. And have the conversation necessary to have a constructive debate and work with folks and have arguments based on facts and logic and listen to opposing views. And that's how you move forward, and that's how you make the investments that we believe in education.
Thank you. I thank you both very much for your thoughtful questions and your answers, and you fit them into pretty much that 1-minute time frame. At this point, we're going to have some closing remarks, again by toss of the coin. Mr. Feltes will go first.
The coin was very favorable to me tonight. So I really thank everybody for being here and participating in this process. I really appreciate it. And There's different approaches to being a state senator. There's a more proactive approach, and there's other approaches. And I just want to say, for me, I'm not running to be a state senator. I'm running to be in the state senate to get things done for everyday people. That's why I'm running. And I wanted to give up a job that I love, where I was helping people, if I didn't genuinely believe I can help even more people in the state senate. And that level of public service is something my wife, Erin, who's here, encouraged me to do, not because of the $100 a year salary, but because she believes in public service as much as I do. And that's what it is in the end. It's about people. It's about investments in our people, in our future, and moving the state forward. And so these are a lot of tough issues that we talked about tonight. And I've taken on tough, complicated issues, both in court and in the state legislature. I've had some big wins. I've had my share of losses. But what I know is true throughout is that nothing good ever happens unless you first stand up, speak out, and fight for it. And that's what I'm going to do as your state senator. Let's keep the conversation going. I ask for your vote. Give me a call. My number's on my website. I'll give it to you now, too. It's 568-3929. 568-3929. Feel free to give me a call, and I look forward to talking to you. Thank you so much.
Ms. Ardinger.
For me, this campaign for state senate is about public service, not politics. My goal in this race is simply to extend my very gratifying experience with local public service to a broader state platform. Sorry. I have honored the democratic values that I was raised with by serving my community and trying to make the lives of my neighbors and fellow citizens better. I believe that that is the essential role of government, and I want to bring that philosophy to work as a state senator. My background as a community volunteer and school board member has given me insights into the needs of this community and has allowed me to give my time in ways which hopefully benefits lots of people. Things like the food pantry, creating a statewide school for young children who are deaf and hard of hearing, and serving on the Board of Child and Family Services. But I believe that my personal background and life experiences have also given me a perspective that would serve this district and its citizens well. As many of you know, I gave up a career in law to take care of my youngest child when she was stricken with a debilitating disease. What I learned from that taught me a great deal about our country's healthcare system, our education system, and our society's response to people with disabilities. Though I went to law school to become a lawyer, it's really been my life experiences that have made me a true advocate. My passions in education, healthcare, and equal rights stem from these personal experiences and would inform my priorities as a state senator. I believe that sustainable policies come from bringing people together. Like many of you, I am disgusted by the cynical politics of Washington, D.C. The toxic atmosphere there prevents anything from getting done, but I truly believe that at state and local levels, we can move forward by bringing people together, listening to each other, and fashioning solutions to our problems. My community-based campaign, based on listening to people and asking questions and working together on solutions, is what I know best, and it's what I do best. If you want to know how successful I'd be as a state senator, look at what I've done in my community and the 3 schools I helped to build. I believe my record of achievement is worthy of your vote on September 9th. Thank you.
And at this point, I will lift my restrictions on applause because both candidates deserve it. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Please spread the word to your friends and neighbors that they can watch this forum on Concord TV within a day or two, or on YouTube. And thank you very much for coming. Thank you all.